Hello, hello, hello. This is Tanya Jones Awalusi coming to you from Butterfly Effect Counseling and Consulting LLC. I hope y'all ready because this is video number 2 with Jamard Banks. He is a herbalist and a coach, and he is ready to drop some knowledge. Now, did you click like and subscribe and hit the notification button so that you don't miss a beat? I hope you did, because in video number 1, Jamard came to us and he explained what it was to be an herbalist. What does it mean? And you definitely want to check out that video. Now, this video, he's giving us practical things that we can do. Matter of fact, 5 things that we can do to improve our health. And he's even throwing in a bonus. One thing we should do right now, or one thing we should stop doing right now in order to improve our health. So please welcome my friend, herbalist and coach, Jamard Banks. We are going to be talking about 5 things you could do to improve your health. And so, Jay, you're going to tell us these 5 things, and we can put a bonus at the end too. Is that right?
That's fair. Yes, we're definitely going to do that.
Okay, so I'm going to give it to you because you're the one that has all the knowledge and all the education that we need. What are these 5 things that we can do to improve our health?
All right. So oftentimes, clients come and, they want to know what they can do to improve their overall health and wellness. And I find that these 5 things, if we pay very close attention to them, they're going to be things that are going to really help us to identify where some of our imbalances are and to help improve our ability to maintain this vehicle the way we want it. Because the goal is not just to get to the end, retire and resign from work, but to actually enjoy life afterwards. And oftentimes we don't get to enjoy life. We kind of lose our quality because we're so burnt out from spending so many years, being in employment. So one of the number one things, one of the 5 things I should say that we want to do to improve our health is get outside and touch some grass. I mean, there's nothing more important than connecting with the nature that you came from, and we spend so much time in constant exposure to positive ions, which are emanating from our computer devices, our tablets, our cell phones. We're next to Wi-Fi all day. We know Wi-Fi exists, but because it's invisible, we don't believe that it has an actual effect on the human body. So all of these things are constantly fraying the electrical conductivity of the central nervous system, and it contributes to a lot of our stress and anxiety. And in some cases, it can go as far as depression as well. What happens is when you go outside and you start walking barefoot in actual soil and you ground yourself, we're actually connecting to something in the earth called these intersecting ley lines of the Becker-Hagen's grid that allows the earth to produce these negative ions that strips the positive ionic charge that attaches itself to our biofield. So we all have electricity that kind of surrounds us. That electricity will pick up different charges from other devices. And we need to have those ions stripped from the body. And one of the best ways of doing it is just getting outside into nature. So as a practitioner, I'm sure you've heard of the sciences and the data and the studies showing where a person who can be stressed, anxious, and depressed, 10 minutes walking into a forest, their brain patterns change immediately. Their alpha, the beta, their data waves, everything starts to shift. Their blood pressure drops, their pulse rate drops. What is going on is the question. And what we don't realize is that making contact and experiencing nature is essentially, one of the primary ways to get the body into a relaxed state so that it can begin to remove some of these toxins. And, that includes mental toxicity as well. We live in a world where we're driven by our thoughts, but our thoughts may not necessarily be our thoughts. It's the thoughts of this world. Let me pay my PSE&G bill. Did I pick up toilet paper? I need to go do this. And we don't have a moment to silence those thoughts. We don't have a moment to let the brain actually relax. Connecting with nature, what we call grounding, not only helps you to do that, but it also allows us to remove those negative ions. It gives us an opportunity to reduce inflammation, because those negative ions are also responsible for helping to lower that inflammation. As a matter of fact, I have a story really quick of a client who I took on a very long hike. We climbed a mountain, and on the way down, he hurt his ankle a little bit, just a little slight twist, but he was able to continue moving. We got to a waterfall at the end, and he remembers putting his feet into the waterfall, which I identified as having these ley lines connected to it. He put his feet into the water, and he just looked at me. He said, "Jay, what's going on?" I said, "How you feel? You feel good?" He's like, "Yo, my ankle doesn't even hurt anymore. What is this, Jesus water?" And he just lost it because he literally watched his ankle shrink. And we don't realize that things like moving water and plants, they have this ionic charge about them that helps to strip out positively charged free radicals. This is why people go to Florida and they just feel good. They don't know why they do, but they feel good. And we forget that a state like Florida actually has all of this moving water on pretty much 3 out of the 4 sides of the state. That movement of that water creates electricity. That electricity creates ions. Just because you don't see it does not mean it's there. And this science has been taken as far as being used in various devices that are patented and used by NASA for their astronauts. I actually use this device called electromagnetic pulse therapy in my office to essentially try to duplicate this same wave pattern that the Earth produces to various degrees to assist in a person's ability to either recover from damaged tissue, improve their blood pressure, lower the insulin response. All of these different things can be done using this device. And here in the States, they don't talk much about it. But over in Europe, it's a class 2 medical device that's on every ambulance because it improves your survival of things like heart attacks and strokes by 60%. And it's a big deal for our astronauts, but not quite, used by the general populace. So you can tell that there's a big bias or contradiction there where it's good enough for our elite, but not really good enough for the people. As a matter of fact, if you go to look at some of the old shows of Dr. Oz, they do have one episode where they spoke about it. And then after that, you don't see any more episodes because at that time, people were using it for pain and inflammation. And they were finding that it was comparative to certain medications that were used for like antispasmodics, like Flexerol and things like that for back pain, and people were recovering from it. So after that video, you didn't really see anything else. Dr. Oz didn't really talk about it anymore. I suspect, I have my own suspicions. I'll just leave it at that. But that's one thing, if you don't have the device yourself or you don't purchase it, they are fairly expensive. But just getting outside and hugging trees, touching the grass, walking barefoot in the soil, these are things that can help to remove those positive ions because we're exposed to these toxic energies all day, every day. We're sleeping with our cell phone next to the bed. Your head may be connected to, on the outside of the wall, it may be connected to one of those smart meters. All of these things are there to interfere with how the body and the brain functions. And we know, especially now with children, the amount of contact they have with their tablets, how it affects their dopamine receptors, how the blue light has a direct effect on their abilities to maintain attention. And then once you tear them away from that, it's like they lose it. So there's a connection that is not seen, not often talked about. And one of the best ways of managing it is to make sure you schedule your time with nature to go back to where we came from. So that's one of the things that I always try to promote that would definitely be very helpful.
I love that. I've been saying on my end to get to the water. So I love that you even said that, right? To get to the water and okay. Okay. Give us more because
Yes.
I know you got more.
So another one is making sure that we know how to poop. So
Okay.
pooping is something that I do with my clients or teaching a client, to remember how to poop, I should say, because we don't even realize how over time, it's almost as though we went from our health practitioners telling us, hey, poop 2 to 3 times per day. And then we went from that to poop once a day. And then from that to, if you poop once every other day, you're okay. I've never found that that's ever okay, especially for a person that's eating 3 square meals a day. If you eat 3 times, you should be pooping 3 times. If you're not pooping 3 times, where is it? Are you holding on to it? And where do these toxins go? So it's really important to know that we're consuming and holding on to more than we're releasing. Okay. And some of the reasons for that is, one, we don't often poop in the right position. So over time, and we're part of that generation where we remember our toilets being very low to the ground and your knees is all the way up and past your hips. And as time went on, our toilets got bigger and bigger. And it's almost like you're sitting on a chair and it's like, hey, I'm on my throne and I'm sitting. That position, which is called a perpendicular or homo erectus position, is actually the wrong position. What happens is we end up constricting there's cords that constricts the sigmoid colon that prevents us from having a fully evacuation in the sigmoid, which means we end up pooping out half the poop and the rest sits on your sigmoid. The sigmoid colon is connected directly in front of in a woman, it would be the woman's womb. In a man, it would be near our prostate. So, we're now have this organ where 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it's full of poop. And it's right next to the very delicate and gentle organs of the prostate, the male sexual organs, the woman's womb. These organs do not need to be sitting next to poop 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We want to make sure we have a full and complete evacuation. So making sure that our bodies are in the right position where your knees are past your hips. Over here, I think we have something called a potty squatty. Over in Europe, it's big time. You find it in every bathroom. Over here, you can simply use a stool or a potty squatty. And what that does is it raises your knees. I've had clients who have issues with hemorrhoids, and simply by using a potty squatty, they're going to start to reduce those symptoms and that discomfort because you no longer have that Candidus albicans that's going to be attached to the poop that's sitting right in the area where your hemorrhoids are being aggravated. So you want to make sure you are pooping. You're pooping enough, okay? Making sure you're taking in plenty of fiber in your diet, okay? And I prefer that from plants. Metamucil is not my favorite because when you read the ingredients, it has fiber and a bunch of other things that your body doesn't need, including in some cases dyes. So you want to be very careful where you get your fiber. I would always suggest consuming or eating your fiber in the form of plants, okay? And then of course, that's pretty much on, pooping. Making sure that you are pooping. As a matter of fact, I will even touch on how it's almost like divine how a child, when we remember seeing babies, when they start running around and moving, you would see them running around in their Pampers, and then all of a sudden they just squat down and you're like, uh-oh, I know what they're doing. They naturally go in the position that we're supposed to be in. And this is why in other countries, they have a hole in the ground because we're supposed to squat. And when you squat, you actually remove all of those toxins. Everything comes out. And you'll find after a few days, you start feeling better because you're not holding on to anything else. You're not holding on to that excess poop in that area. And that contributes to a lot of the discomfort and bloating that we have. So being in the proper position for pooping and making sure that your poop frequency matches your consumption, how much food you're consuming is important. And then including tons of fiber. So that's something I definitely, can make huge strides in a person's health just from understanding, the importance of evacuation. Because what we don't evacuate, we hold on to like baggage. And it's just like emotions, certain emotions and triggers, we hold on to it and we never get rid of it. And it starts to go through stages. When we hold on to those things, they go through stages too. You can go through where something is just a mood and then it starts to go into a temperament. And then from that point, it becomes a personality trait. Same thing happens inside the body. So, these toxins, they can just start off as poop and then it becomes a colonic stone. And now it's connected to a parasite. Okay. We never let it go. And it starts to become triggered by certain emotional states. So, making sure that we have the ability to let go of poop allows us to let go of emotions.
Ooh, okay. I did not see that coming, but I'm glad it's on there because it seems extremely important that we have the proper position and the proper frequency.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. We're learning today. Okay. Number 3. Give us more.
Number 3, I would have to say, having a really good idea of if and how much animal protein a person should be consuming, as well as what type of animal proteins a person should be consuming. So here at Herbal Chemistry, we kind of dive really deep into figuring out where a person's genetic blueprinting lies. I like to use a lot of Dr. Diadamo's work as far as blood type is concerned. But in any event, even if you don't have any of that or you're not looking for that, there's certain things that I always recommend. If a person is consuming animal protein, no one in the United States should be consuming animal protein more than 3 to 4 times per week. And that includes one serving. What we have to realize is that there is a balance in consumption of life and necrotic flesh. Okay. The more death you consume, the more your body is going to get used to processing death, and it slows the body down. You still need to balance it out with a higher amount of life. So the typical American diet is like bacon and eggs in the morning, turkey and cheese sandwich in the afternoon, some chicken breast at night with some vegetables and rice. You just had 3 servings in one day. You're done for the rest of the week. But this becomes the daily regimen that everyone has, not realizing that they're not giving their body the proper time to process this animal protein. Animal protein takes a lot of time to process, a lot of time. We oftentimes don't even realize, but after going on a fasting journey, by the time you get to your 8th, 9th day, you're still pooping out old animal protein. Like I remember pooping out a cheesesteak from like 35 years ago from Tasty Fry. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what is this coming out of me? And it was some very old fecal matter that I was holding on to. And this was on my 8th or 9th day of fasting where I haven't eaten anything, but here comes this piece, and it's important that we know how much to consume. So oftentimes, we're living in America. Everyone wants to consume these big, huge portions. We all want more is better. And the reality is, what works for you is what's best. Whatever fits in your hand. You don't have to always have a scale. If it can fit in your hand, that's likely the amount of animal protein that you need. That could be anywhere between 3.5 to 7 ounces, depending upon your activity level. I know that a lot of sports trainers and personal trainers, they promote eating things like chicken constantly because you're exercising. The problem with that, and I oftentimes coach personal trainers on having a better understanding of using, I guess you would say, high quality proteins over crude protein, because essentially protein is a myth. I like to consider it a myth because it's a very general word that is supposed to encompass all of these amino acid chains. And when you start breaking down each amino acid chain, you're going to realize that a lot of the animal proteins that you're consuming don't have what you need. So you're going to find you're going to have a better spectrum in things like avocado, in certain fruits like watermelon. You're going to find them in beans. You're not going to have everything there. So understanding that, the overconsumption of animal protein will slow the body down. It also opens us up to taking in whatever experiences that animal has. So animals have DNA, and DNA holds information. It holds emotion. If our DNA holds 10% of what we're born with and 90% of our environment, our experiences, the things we go through in our life, then that piece of chicken is 10% of what that chick was born with, and then 90% of all of its experiences. And then when we start to think about what experiences this chicken may have had in a chicken coop, if it was coming from a farm or if it lived in a black box watching its relatives die and stepping on feces and getting shots and having all these horrible experiences, that gets encoded in its DNA. It lives in a state of fear, stress, and anxiety. And then we consume that information, and that becomes part of our DNA because you are what you eat. And as we break down that code, now we're going to be looking and we're going to say, why do I have these dreams? Why am I experiencing these nightmares? Why do I feel this way? Because we're consuming our emotions too. And that was the necessary importance of things like meditation and prayer over food, because it's supposed to help to purify and cleanse that protein. But there's only so much cleansing that we can do depending upon whose emotions were greater, because we're coming from a state of gratitude, or at least we should be coming from a state of gratitude. But it's kind of hard to kind of cover that, use gratitude to cover up another animal's suffering. So I've started to take a look into harvesting my own. I'm teaching my sons hunting. I like fishing. And there's a certain level of respect that comes with the treatment of animals in that regard. So, and of course, if you are going to consume animal protein, always avoid the foods that are common. If it's something that's in every supermarket and it's enough to feed you for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, chances are they're doing something to that particular animal to help make it reproduce to meet the demand of the people. And if it's meeting the demand of the people, what did they do? They have to make it reproduce, which means it's getting some form of estrogen. Okay. So the hormone, and you can't cook a hormone out. So now you're eating excess estrogen. And then we ask as men, why is our testosterone just slowly dropping? Why are women suffering from things like fibroids and cysts? All of these things are found in the food. This is one of the few countries that has such high issues with our sexual organs. So managing the consumption of animal protein and keeping it in proper balance with everything else that you're consuming is of the utmost importance as well.
Wow. So we didn't talk about this, but I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean everyone needs to be a vegan?
I like veganism to an extent. I think that everything ain't for everybody. I like the approach of veganism during detoxification. However, I do consume animal protein. As a consumer of animal protein, I'm very picky about my frequency and when I consume it. I actually wait for very specific times to consume it. So everyone does not need to be an actual vegan. I find that, using veganism intermittently may serve one person, whereas a person who may be like a type A may find that being a vegan, more often than not, may be more beneficial based on their blood type, based on their genetic blueprint, based on certain things that will help them to break down certain foods. So, for example, I'm a type O, and veganism does work well for me in certain areas, but every now and again, I need a little bit of lamb or a little bit of goat. Primarily, my mainstay of animal protein, when I do consume it, is things like sardines. Sardines, pound for pound, is probably one of the most nutrient dense fish on the planet. Like, it's absolutely amazing. You're getting selenium, which everyone's deficient in. You're getting all of your vitamin E's. If it's kept in olive oil, a really good grade of olive oil, you're getting all the good stuff from those as well. It's pound for pound one of the best forms of food. Just that small can will give you approximately 25 to 27 grams of protein, which is absolutely amazing.
Wow. Wow. Okay. I'm glad I asked. I'm glad All right, Banks. So I know you have more. Please tell us, what's the fourth thing that people can do to improve their health and wellness?
So health and wellness seems to be revolved a lot around eating. And I know we talked a little bit about animal protein, but one of the functions, is what happens outside of the body and how we introduce food. So, the order in which we consume food and the proper combinations of food is really important. So I'm going to say that, eating our food in order, in proper combination, and taking the time to chew. None of us chew our food. And I especially noticed this with myself, especially coming from working in state law enforcement. You're either eating on the go, you got 20 minutes to suck your food down and then keep it moving, you're walking, you're chewing. And this environment that we live in does not constitute having enough time to really fully enjoy our meal and to create an intimate connection with the food that is supposed to be giving you life. It's kind of like just a filler, it's a waste of time so that we can get back to work. It's like almost like a task. And this led us to wanting to enjoy our food more by making all of these elaborate dishes that are just, really extra tasty to light up our taste buds. And then we overindulge in them because we don't have that balance. So finding the time to actually chew your food is extremely important. If you ever think about it, just taking a piece of steak and hitting it with a mallet a few times, that steak's not going to break up. And if you think about what your gut has to do to break that protein down, it's going to take a very long time. Okay. Our gut is just like an oven. It has to be really, really hot in order to cook and break down the foods that we're putting inside of us. So one of the things I always like to say is that our ancient monks would say this, and it hits home for me. we are supposed to drink our food and eat our water. So we're literally supposed to be chewing a minimum of 33 times. I try to go to 40, okay, of every forkful of food. That chewing, that mastication process is what turns the oven on. And oftentimes people may have noticed difficulty with things like bloating or indigestion, especially if they have like a really thick smoothie with too much protein in it or too much fat in it, and they go to consume it, because the act of chewing actually sends signals to the gut to activate and turn on the hydrochloric acid. So you have the pepsin to break down the protein, but because you're not doing that, what ends up happening is you're partially digesting your meal. So it's really important to allow your body to experience that entire process, because each one of those mechanisms are interconnected. It sends signals to the brain, it sends signals to the gut. We have in our tongue 90,000 receptors. Each of those receptors have a job to pick up a sense, and it can send signals through the central nervous system to different areas of the body. So it's important that we find that time and that space to actually sit down, connect with your meal, and chew our food. So that does take some time, but chewing is by far the first step of the line of defense that our bodies have when it comes to breaking down food. And once something gets past that, because we inhaled it, we're now making our gut and our small intestines work 2, 3, 4 times as hard to process food. And over time, over 10 years, 15 years, the gut gets tired. Okay. The hydrochloric acid gets lower, it gets weaker. And it's almost like the same thing as if after using your oven for so long, you can't get the oven hot enough to 450 degrees. So now you're baking your chicken at 275, but you're still baking it for the same amount of time for about half an hour, 45 minutes. And what ends up happening is that when you go look, you can look on the outside of the chicken, it's cooked. But when you open up the inside, it's like kind of gooey. It ain't ready yet. Same thing happens to your small intestines. Your small intestines is now getting partially digested pathogens and bacteria that your hydrochloric acid would have been, under normal circumstances, been able to process. But now you get this response where your body is now trying to break down all of these pathogens in the small intestines, which it doesn't have any protection. So what ends up happening is we end up with this awful imbalance because we're now weakening our defense system. So making sure that we're eating our food and chewing it, as well as making sure we're consuming our food in a proper order. Consuming, anywhere between 2 to 4 cups of vegetables first is really important before we move on to our animal protein. And then making sure that we're not combining our animal proteins with foods that contains like carbohydrates or starches, especially the refined grains. And a perfect example of that is like steak and potatoes. Yeah, steak and potatoes. We all grew up thinking that this is a great combination. It's yummy. We all enjoy it. But essentially, it's what? It's a protein next to a glucose molecule. And what we don't want is glucose molecules attached to amino acid chains. That's what we call A1C. So as within, so without. What occurs inside the body is you start having this protein that has sugar attached to it. And therefore, this protein cannot get recycled or be properly used inside the body. And we call that blood cells. And then you start to have this anemic-like response. So it's important that we practice what we want our bodies to have. And traditionally, we've all been raised to believe that we're supposed to have carbohydrates next to your protein. And that's definitely not the case. So having a proper order to eating and separating those carbs from your proteins is extremely important. And I'm not saying not to have them. I have my own gripe as to what type of carbs a person should consume and how much of them. But I'm not saying you shouldn't have them, but I am saying you want to avoid having them with those dense proteins. That's no good. It's not going to help the body to process them. So sticking with those things, you're going to see some really good improvements in a person's health.
Who knew there was so much to this? Because when you first said it, I'm like, okay, the order. I'm thinking like, eat your peas first, like then comes the chicken. But like, it's like a science.
It is. As a matter of fact, when you consume vegetables, you're not just consuming the fiber, but you're consuming the prebiotic fiber. Prebiotic means pre-bio. So what are we giving to the life inside our gut first?
Wow.
Okay. So we're feeding the life inside our gut, which is the bacteria. And the bacteria gives us life. They're literally the managers of our soil. Just like on the earth, we got farmers. Well, they're in there farming for us. And the tools that we give them will determine how well they're able to farm. So if you consume broccoli and vegetables first, what happens is that prebiotic, those little lifers in there, that bacteria, they're going to start to consume that fiber because we don't eat it. And I remember reading a book and having a discussion with a colleague, and they were basically saying how, we don't get anything from certain vegetables and fibers, which is almost true, but not quite, because essentially our job is to feed the bacteria inside of us. And when they get that bacteria, some of the bacteria actually consumes the prebiotic fiber, and then they poop out, I know it's disgusting, but they poop out certain types of fats that our body utilizes as a fuel. So we're able to get energy from their byproduct. And that's essentially what they litter our soil. So it's really important to maintain that proper balance, which is why too much animal protein, going back to the animal protein, is no good, because who are you feeding? We're not feeding the bacteria anymore. They don't want that. They're looking for those vegetables. They're looking for that fiber. And if we don't give them enough of it, they're not able to do their job to help us. So we end up firing our farmers, and then we move in, the parasites and the candida and the yeast and all those things, and they start doing their job to break down what we give them. So making sure that we have the proper order and making sure that we are chewing our food, that whole process of enjoying our meal the right way is extremely important. It can be a massive game changer for us as far as our health and wellness.
Wow. And so I know when I'm throwing in another one here, so you bear with me, Jay, but I know when I did my first detox with you, I did it for 8 days. Dear Lord, didn't know I could do that, but I did it. I did an 8-day detox with you, and I almost lost it because I couldn't eat things. And I remember chewing on ice and trying my best. But is there a connection between like the emotions and actually chewing? I just thought of this one.
Absolutely. So oftentimes the receptors in the tongue, they get very much so connected to certain activities in the brain, especially if there's certain bacteria, fungus, yeast, parasites that are moving throughout the body. So emotionally, if you think, if a person, say they have a breakup or something happens, right? And they have an emotional response, that emotional response they have will trigger them to, their comfort response would be, well, I want dopamine. I think I'm going to go and get myself some Ben and Jerry's. So then you get Ben and Jerry's, and then you down that Ben and Jerry's, a whole pint or 2 pints or whatever it is, half gallon. And when you consume that much sugar, you're going to start activating bacteria or fungus. That fungus now gets to bacterially translocate and becomes interconnected with the dopamine response to a certain food, which is connected to a certain emotion. Okay, so whenever you have this specific emotion, that fungus or bacteria starts to monitor your neurotransmitters and then waits for you to have that emotion, or helps to assist its triggering, so that they can consume what you connected to that emotional state. So now depression becomes sugar, you understand? And they're going to help to assist that, because now they're translocating into the brain. They want to make sure that you release dopamine every time you consume that particular food, which is why you'll see certain people, they'll feel really depressed, they'll feel really bad, but then they eat a donut and they're like, oh my God, this donut's so good. They're having a dopamine response, okay? And it's being assisted by certain bacteria. Essentially, we think we're in control, but bacteria, viruses, and fungus and yeast, they drive us. This is their vehicle too. And by far, there's more of them than there are of us inside and outside the body. So, there's a very intricate connection. As a matter of fact, there's a bacteria that I had to make sure that I had active, that was inactive in my body, called Acidophilus rhamnosus. And it's responsible for whether or not you're going to get depressed. So you want to be very careful and make sure you're feeding this bacteria, so that I can kind of manage issues and bouts with depression for myself, because it becomes neurochemical as well. So there is a very intimate connection with how the gut is responsible for a lot of these feel-good transmitters. And if your gut can't produce it, the brain won't know how well to manage it. Your gut essentially is your brain. That's the way I look at it. The gut is the brain, And your brain is considered to be an interpreter. Its job is to ask the questions, figure out the final calculation, and shove it out. But the gut is going to be the one that says, hey, brain, I need estrogen. And then your brain comes in and says, okay, let's take a look at the videotape. Well, looks like you got plenty of estrogen in there because you just got finished eating some type of food that had artificial excess estrogen in it. So then it misreads, misinterprets because of the food, and then spits out a smaller amount. And then that's where we have issues with imbalances with hormones. So now people are losing their estrogen. And estrogen is very, very important, even for men. And, we tend to think that estrogen is just a feminine molecule, but for men, maintaining estrogen helps with how my hippocampus communicates to the prefrontal cortex. It's a neurotransmitter. I need that. It helps me to speak with people, help me to find comfort and increase communication skills. So it's very, very important. And this gets into dives us right into another science where we can start looking at estrogen and how or the lack thereof, or its replacement of, in issues with things like Alzheimer's and depression. So I'm sorry, Alzheimer's and dementia, and depression technically. So yeah, Alzheimer's and dementia. So it gets very, very deep, and I won't go too much into it because I can feel myself going down a rabbit hole. But eating in proper order and making sure that you're treating your meals as if they are they're a significant part of your day, and allotting the time for them is extremely important. And then giving them the time so that you can chew your food will make a huge impact on your overall health and wellness.
Wow. Okay, so that leaves us with our number one thing that we could be doing to improve our health.
Number one, detox. If you live in the United States, we are exposed to so many toxins that unless you're literally living off grid, there's no way you're not going to get exposed. And that includes, because there's two factors working against us. We are not receiving the proper amount of nutrition. Okay. The numbers that are given to us are for like the bare minimum. For example, doses of selenium, I believe, in the United States is maybe at about 200 micrograms or 100 micrograms, they'll say here. But if you go over to China, they want you to have about 1,200. Okay. So the numbers that we have are very skewed. I like to say they're lowballed, and the dosing is inappropriate. So supplementation is like a must. But giving space for that supplementation to work includes detoxifying. You cannot have two things occupy the same space at the same time. If I give you 3 bags of garbage, you cannot bring in a new kitchen set. You have to get rid of the trash first. And one of the things is that a lot of people are into losing weight, because the media always pushes lose fat, get in shape, lose fat, burn fat, get rid of fat. Fat is only one part of the problem. What we don't realize is that the body works off something called adipose tissue toxicity ratio. And essentially what that is where fat cells are used to store toxins. So the larger fat cell, the more toxins is being stored. When we try to change the size of the fat, that ratio gets skewed, and the body then recalibrates itself based on that change. It's going to say to itself, well, 3 months ago, I had 90% fat in this cell and 10% toxicity. But since we started using this particular product that burned fat, now I have 60% fat, and that puts me at 40% toxicity. This isn't going to work for me, says the body. And then what happens is, this is one of the reasons why a lot of people will lose weight temporarily for 3 to 4 months. And then the next season, all of a sudden, they're like, I'm going crazy. And then they end up gaining that weight back. And it's primarily because the body's trying to compromise the toxicity ratio in the body because we didn't get rid of the garbage. We held onto the garbage and got rid of the fat. And that's no good for the body. The body wants to increase that fat, and it starts to put it back in. In addition to that, you're going to have things like bacteria and fungus and viruses and yeast and all these things offering the wrong information. Detoxification is a must that will allow the opportunity for the body to regenerate and repair itself, because essentially that's its job. There was a point where the body detoxes itself to an extent, but without proper bowel evacuation, which we know about. If you're holding on to 2 pounds, 3 pounds, 6 pounds of poop, what does this poop do inside the body? Where is it going to get stored? When you're consuming foods and using things like metal-based antiperspirants inside the body. Where does this metal go? How does it get stored? It's going to get stored in the organs. It's going to go to the central nervous system. We want to actively take an opportunity to allow our body its natural state to regenerate and rejuvenate itself. And that includes whatever approaches we use. In my company, we coach people through very specific forms of detoxification. I would like to say that we're probably, top notch and one of the best at doing it, because we've done it with so many people. And every stone that comes up, we have no issues with making sure that a person gets all the information that they need. And not only that, but make sure that they have the detox that's right for them. Because detoxing has become very fad-like, I guess. And people are selling, all sorts of stuff. But the reality is you want to know what detox works best for you. What state are you putting your body through? Are you trying to remove parasites? Are you trying to remove metal? Are you trying to rebalance your hormones? What is it that your body needs to cleanse from? Because you cannot find a product or group of products that are going to literally do all of that at once. So detoxing, and however that looks for a person, if you decide to do it yourself, that's great. Fasting for short periods of time, intermittent fasting is a form of detoxification. Dry fasting is a form of detoxification. All of these different approaches will help to allow the body some time to regenerate. But that's really probably the most important, because hitting that reset button for your body is just like having your oven and then you just stop cooking with your oven. You're now giving your oven an opportunity to clean itself. So you turn the oven on high, you spray on some oven off, you cook up all that grime and the lasagna that's spilt at the bottom, and you get to clean your oven. But you can't cook with your oven and clean your oven at the same time. You need to do one or the other. And we do need to clean our ovens seasonally. Making sure that it's done at least every 4 to 6 months is really important, because technically our bodies are recalibrating themselves every season. That's why we have a flu season, a hay fever season, a cold season. There's a virus season. There's a season connected to everything. Why is it a season? Because that's when the body is ready for change. It's ready to shift. So a person has a flu-like or cold-like reaction or hay fever because the season's shifting and your body is in a state of detoxification. So your body will detox itself whether you like it or not. But the goal is for us to kind of beat it to the punch and prepare ourselves. So I get hay fever sometimes. I've learned how to manage it without medicine. And the minute I get that first sneeze, I already know, time to detox. So then I put myself through that detoxification state. And once a person is fasting, you can pretty much shut down the all of that inflammation that's going to come from that response, as long as you're including, very specific supplements that the body is going to require. And that's really probably the number one thing, is if you're detoxing, if you're fasting, if you're doing anything to remove the toxins that your body's exposed to, versus both external and internal. This includes, and I don't want to leave it at just the food, but this goes into your practice as well, what a person watches, whether they're watching news or not. And I'm sure you remember in my detoxes, I would basically write in there, look, I don't want you watching news. I don't want you watching no murder movies. I don't want anything that's going to have a very specific sound or frequency in its undertone, because that will have a direct effect on the water in your system. And it will either prevent or inhibit how certain supplements that I give you will bind to the receptors in your cells. So it's really, really important that during that time, our diet just doesn't include the food or lack thereof, but, it's also including the information that we're taking in. What books are you going to read? What practices are you going to pick up? And I've noticed that through this practice of detoxification, it's when I picked up the most skills. It's almost as though I was able to kind of go back into my childhood self. And that's where you see me on TikTok and Instagram. I'm shooting a bow, and then I'm fishing, and then I'm, camping out in the middle of the forest. Whatever it takes, all of those things came to me, through detoxification, because I was able to get back to myself, because I was able to silence and quiet all the things in and around me. So that detoxification by far is, have always been used as a source of being able to connect with oneself and that energy that they look to. with all the primary religions, some measure of detoxification and or fasting is always mentioned. So there is a connection to removing certain things from our animalistic instinct and being able to take control of them. And when you can walk into a restaurant and sit down after fasting for 6 and 7 days and just order a cup of tea and be good with it, you have thus conquered your most savage instinct, or one of your most savage instincts. And that in and of itself will make a person realize the true power of their mind and how important it is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Whew, okay, so we need to detox.
Yes, absolutely. Definitely detox.
I love it. Love it. So I was told that you have a bonus, and I believe I heard your bonus within that detox, but what is one thing, or should I say the number one thing that you wish everyone would stop? What is that?
One of them, and there's a lot of things, but because we are currently in preparation for our clean and chelate, metal toxicity is an issue. And one of the things that I would prefer people to discontinue use of or find ways in and around it would be antiperspirants with aluminum. And the reason why, one, aluminum is a toxic metal. Okay. It's very, very light, but very magnetic. And it is very much so attracted to our central nervous system. It will bind to receptors in there like there's no tomorrow. In fact, when you have too much aluminum in your body, it can also interfere with how well your body utilizes and processes things like zinc, which we think is very important. We know how important it is, but it's not getting where it needs to go because they're chemically and structurally built very similar, and one is faster than the other. So you want to lower their intake of aluminum and open up those receptors so that the zinc actually does work inside the body. Aluminum is one of the reasons why, if you ever seen a person get like the yellow stains under their t-shirt, that yellow is aluminum. That's the body trying to push the aluminum out of the system. So when we use an antiperspirant, we're actually preventing our bodies from sweating. Okay. Roughly about 10 to 12% of our lymphatic tissue is like literally underneath our armpits. That is a primary area for our bodies to remove toxins. And what organs is right next to that? That would be the breasts. Okay. So when our bodies is blocking these toxins, the garbage has to go somewhere. It gets clogged up, it gets blocked. Okay. The other, another 50% would be somewhere around in the inner thighs. And then 70% of your lymphatic tissue is in your stomach. So sweating is actually necessary. Sweating is one of the ways we're able to remove toxins out of the body and to prevent yourself from sweating. And on top of that, add in a chemical that is going to neither help or improve your health. It's kind of like a double whammy. So if there was something I would say to use or to remove, it would definitely be antiperspirants. There are a lot of options that you can look into. I, for one, have I would either make my own antiperspirant deodorant sprays. I actually prefer to sweat. And even on sweaty days, unless I'm exercising, it's never that much sweat. But you want to keep those pores open. You also want to make sure that you're able to, use the proper combination, or you want to make sure that your pores are able to remain clear and open. So some of the things that we've used in the past, a person can take a slice of lemon and wipe it under their armpits. And what that does is it helps to manage the bacteria, because there's only two things that's going to really give you a smell. It's going to either be bacteria or it's going to be some type of toxin that your body's trying to get rid of. So you're going to find that when your body, especially your liver, is bombarded with too many toxins to process, it starts to push them up the lymphatic system. As it starts getting pushed up, your body tries to get rid of it, and then we block the passageway. It's almost like we're stopping the garbage man from going down a one-way street. Okay. And then it starts to just build up and it makes gas and it starts to stink because it's fermenting. Bacteria, however, which is normal, and we expect bacteria to grow because it grows all over our body and within. Bacteria generally takes about 4 to 5 days to grow. And this is why lemons work perfectly, because I can take a slice of lemon, wipe it under my armpit, and I will not produce a smell for about 5 days. And this is after showers, sweating, running, taking a nice 15-mile walk or hike or whatever it is that I'm doing outside, and still produce no smell. There are other natural approaches. Alcohol obviously works. You could use like a food grade alcohol mixed with different essential oils. That works when you do it in a proper combination. There are quite a few options that a person can explore to help with managing the bacteria. However, managing metal toxicity or other toxins that the body's trying to excrete, that starts with detoxification. So you want to make sure that the other avenues are open so that the body is subject to change. So during our detoxes, that's actually when we try to introduce, like in this one for clean and chelate, we introduce the removal of deodorants. And then we always let everyone know, look, there's going to be a period, you might have a smell as you get rid of this stuff. But if you find that nice pocket for your body to detox itself off, that's when you're going to be able to introduce something simpler. And I actually get a kick out of not having to spend like $8, $9 for a stick of deodorant anymore. It's so much easier for me to grab a lemon and then just wipe a slice of lemon under my armpits. And most of the time I usually forget. And only if I have a really, really rough day, I don't know why, but it's only like a very, very light scent under my right armpit. That's the only one that ever produces a smell. The left one never stinks. So I don't know. I probably have like a tasty fried cheeseburger in there from 35 years ago, just rotting away on my my colon, I guess, on that side. But that's the only side that would produce a very light smell after about a week.
Wow. 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 Okay. You blow me away because you come in here and you give us all this knowledge, and I would never think of, well, that's not true. I've heard like rubbing lemon with something else can get rid of like dark spots and things like that, but a lemon under your arms takes away. Okay. Well, Jay, you always cease to amaze me and surprise me with something. I thank you for coming on here with the 5 things that we can do plus the bonus. How can people find you?
You can go to herbalchemistry.com, and that's chemistry spelled with a K instead of a CH. And you can join our website. We often send emails letting you know of our different programs, different products that are going to be coming out, all of those things to stay abreast. And you can also find us on the social media apps, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and there are some videos on YouTube as well.
Thank you. This has been wonderful. I really appreciate you doing this. I'm so glad our calendars could fit again, but I love it. I love it. I love it. We appreciate all the knowledge. And of course, I'll have everything in the details to get in contact with you in the description. But thank you. Thank you so much for doing this and just dropping us with all this knowledge and coming through. And I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure.
Definitely. Peace and good health, everyone.